And then what? And then what happened in your relationship with OceanGate?
Well, so, I basically just got an email from him out of the blue saying, this is your chance, come to the Bahamas, and I did. And we dove to over 12,000 feet, and there were around 30 people there. Renata was there. There were a lot of other mission specialists in waiting that were clearly eager to go, and they were basically, I was there about a week, and we had this whole small resort rented out in Marsh Harbor. Stockton and I were staying in the same house so they had the whole resort filled up, and then they had a bunch of extra houses that rented out. And actually, I slept outside in a hammock. But we would have meals together, and when we went out, it was Stockton, myself, not sure how to say his name, but he was in his early 20s, and he was a sonar technician for a third-party supplier, I believe, and his duty was something like calibrating the sonar. And then it was a friend of Stockton from childhood who was, I believe, the COO on the company, and he told us to be prepared for noises, and he had recently done the solo dive on his own, and basically just said, this is going to make noise, and brace yourselves. And do you guys have the acoustic emissions real-time monitoring graph for that dive? Has that surfaced at all?
Excuse me, could we just specify the time frame at all of what we're discussing?
April
Yes.
of 2018?
That was the first Titan hull.
The first hull, yeah.
I don't believe we have that as an exhibit, sir. The acoustics for that hull.
Yeah. I would be very curious to see that if you ever come across it in your investigation. But
April of 2018?
I believe so.
2019.
Well, we need to figure that out, right?
Right. Could that have been April 2019, sir?
What's the page one? Yeah, I'm sorry, 2019. You're right.
So if you would continue. Now,
Yeah.
you were just speaking about the sonar tech and those test dives. So
Yeah.
continue, please.
So there were 4 of us in there, and in retrospect, there were a lot of red flags that now, after the implosion and learning more and putting different pieces of the puzzle together, start making sense and are kind of clues. But so there are 4 of us in there. Obviously, there could have been 5. There are many people back on shore that would have eagerly, he would have been appeasing customers waiting to go, filling that 5th seat. But there was only the 4 of us. And it made a lot of noise. And when we got down there, and another clue in retrospect is we didn't tow out. It's a fairly gentle sloping bottom. We had to go much farther offshore than I would need to go that deep off of Roatan. We were probably 10 or 12 miles offshore. And he chose to stop the towing a little shallow. We could have easily gone a little deeper, and that would have been a better test. But I think that was an indication of his lack of faith in that vessel. And when we got down there, he didn't do any of the driving in my recollection. He immediately, I believe I was the first one to drive, but he basically insisted, it was his idea, nobody asked to drive, had each of us drive. And I think that was his kind of sick way of, if we had imploded, we were a little bit in control of our own destiny, because when we were driving, we were needing to go towards deeper water the idea was really we were trying to get to the exact depth of the Titanic to confirm the hull was safe for that depth. And, he knew at that point what the cross-section of the hull looked like. He knew that it had been hit by lightning. He knew that his engineer had quit, that would refuse to go in it, that the Lockridge was refusing. I didn't know any of these things.
Are you basing that on testimony that you have viewed here at the?
Wired magazine articles, talking to other people involved in things I've learned in the last year.
OceanGate?
Right, so I think that would be important to understand if Mr. Stanley is talking about conversations he had with Mr. Rush at the time, or if this is speaking now. There's been obviously a lot of information.
So, yeah, Mr. Stanley, just to clarify, you're making that position on
From
what you
things
think-
I've learned after the implosion. These are things that Rush never told me.
Yes, sir. And it's from social media and media reports.
And being here and talking to people directly.
Understand. Sir.
Yes, if you could just limit to your answers to the time frame before the accident occurred on June 18th of what you knew then.
Okay. So we got down there, and it's making noises that, the sound of a carbon fiber band breaking when it's in a 5-inch thick matrix is a lot of energy being released. And we were all clearly a little disnerved, but he had warned us, and I think nobody wanted to be the one to, say they wanted to go up first. But I remember that at one point when I was driving, the bottom was a very gentle slope, and you didn't have a compass in front of you. The compass was on the screen, I believe, and you were actually able to drive to deeper water, and the window was a little distorting in terms of being able to tell the slope on the bottom, but you could actually drive to deeper water by the cracking sounds would amplify when you got deeper. And at some point, I don't remember who, we were all like, well, that's probably close enough. We've been down here long enough, and we went back up. And what I wrote him in the emails, and which is even more concerning than the cracking sounds that happened on the way down or while we were at the bottom, is that there was a kind of like a grand finale of cracking sounds as we were getting close to the surface, which I'm not a carbon fiber expert, but just thinking about it logically, the only way that you get a whole lot of more cracking when you're coming back up is that material degraded so much that it stored energy that was then released as the pressure was released. And, that's what I wrote him in the email. And so I'm not allowed to talk about the 11 square feet of visible delamination that is now on the public record?
Well, we're focusing right now on what you knew up to the 18th of June, the accident day in 2023.
Okay. Well, I didn't know about, all I knew at that point was what I heard. And that was enough for me to write these emails. I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't been told anything. And just off of that information, you know, how many emails back and forth over more than a year?
So you had mentioned a lightning strike. Did Mr. Rush or anybody at OceanGate prior to your dive on that Titan hull, did they tell you that there was a lightning strike in the vicinity of the Titan hull in the Bahamas?
I don't believe so. I think the first time I heard of a lightning strike was reading about it.
Do you know the damage a lightning strike will do to a vessel?
I'm sure it would be extensive, especially to a carbon fiber hull that's conductive.
If you had known that, would you have gone on the test dive?
No. If I had known there's a lot of things that if I had known, I wouldn't have gone. People have told me that I was, you know, stupid, naive, but really what it came down to was at that point, I had no reason to believe that Stockton was a liar, and I had no evidence of any lies on his part. And when he said that he did a proper amount of testing, and you know, he didn't, you know, he's a trained engineer. He's not an idiot. He's got this whole organization behind him. It didn't. A lot of the things I've learned in the last 18 months or whatever have been very shocking.
So you mentioned the sound of carbon fiber snapping or breaking in a 5-inch thick carbon fiber hull. How do you know what that sound sounds like?
Because I was there and I heard it.
Well, I mean, how did you identify that it was the sound of carbon fibers snapping?
You could even localize where it was coming from. We were hearing it so often that the first couple times it was disnerving. And then when it kept happening, I remember I was the one that was able to isolate the area where it was coming from and told them this is the area, and was listening right there. It's also a clue to me about Stockton's psychology in terms of, I mean, I tested both my vehicles myself, solo. I've heard things underwater, but to be 2 miles underwater by yourself in something that you know your engineer wouldn't go in, you know was hit by lightning, and you've seen a cross-section of that hull, he was scared, because if he wasn't scared, he would have already isolated where the noises were coming from on his first dive. When I isolated the area, that was new information to him. But he was down there by himself, scared, and he kept going. That, to me, is not somebody with a, I have a high tolerance to risk. I've done a lot of adrenaline-seeking activities, but I don't believe, normal behavior.
So after that dive that you were on, where you heard those sounds, we've heard testimony in here that some acoustic sounds heard inside the submarine by the real-time monitoring system, which is an acoustic emission, right, could be the frame shifting as opposed to the hull. So after you came up from the dive, did you partake in any meeting where the results of the real-time monitoring acoustic sensors were examined by the group and tried to isolate where the sound occurred?
I personally never saw any data from the real-time monitoring system. I didn't see the screen. I actually thought perhaps the whole system was a bit of a sham until the last couple days' testimony. That information was not shared with me. He didn't think much of he didn't have me sign a waiver, and he never gave me a spiel about how everything's transparent and please ask any questions. It was just like, you're here, let's go.
And did you understand that that hull, which we've used different terms for, we've used the term prototype and so forth, that hull, if it completed successful testing in the Bahamas, was intended to go out on a Titanic expedition following the completion of those tests in the Bahamas?
Yeah, I mean, that's why all those mission specialists were there. They were jonesing to go. He had everything lined up. And I mean, that's relayed in my emails, trying to tell him that there was no... I remember conversations with him, too, around that time in the Bahamas in person, where I was still giving him the benefit of the doubt of, okay, maybe you've done enough testing and you know it makes so much noise and nobody's going to die. I kept trying to tell him, you do not have a marketable product. You are going to get out there, and if you have 4 people plus yourself in there, and it's making things anything like what we heard, one of those people is going to say, hell no, I want to go back to the surface. So, and how's that a good business model? Like, now, you know? And then I also, things were not working on the sub properly on our dive. There was something wrong with the drop weights. There were issues we had plenty of issues. And, you know, any new vehicle is going to have issues. And the more unique and one-off it is, and the more things that you're doing that haven't been done before, the more issues you're going to have. Everything about this vehicle hadn't been done before. I mean, all the systems. He hated buying something off the shelf if he thought he could rig it together himself. And I also was making the point to him from a businessman perspective, like, what's your refund policy going to be? Like, I mean, to me, it's very cut and dry. In my operation, you know, if I have to end a dive early, I tell my customers, I'm like, do you want the good news or the bad news? Which is basically like, we're going to have to go up and the dive's ending short, but it was free. Like, I could not have the reviews I have on TripAdvisor with his kind of business philosophy of, well, you'll get a credit for next year. Like, what the hell is that? And so it was obvious that he wasn't even going to have a 50% rate of dives without major issues. So when you're charging people 6 figures, how are you, just from a business perspective, the whole thing seemed completely premature.
So I wanted...
One moment, please, Mr. Fawcett. OceanGate, do you have a comment?
That's why I'm just not sure what the question was, actually.
Mr. Fawcett, what?
Yes, it was, were you aware that the Titan submersible, if it successfully passed its testing regime in the Bahamas, if it was going out on the Titanic mission that year, once those tests were complete?
And so that was my answer. I mean, this was a main point of contention and argument that I had with Stockton in person in the Bahamas, was from a business perspective, how are you going to keep delivering a partial product to a customer and you're in the middle of the ocean and, you know, you've already basically spent, doesn't cost him any less if he has to end a dive early. He should really get everything figured out ahead of time and then take it out there.